But we've only got one thing on the topics there. So you should do a quick demo of the rolling update thing. See if anything stands out. Right, I should share a screen. I like to share my email normally, don't I? Okay, that looks like a terminal, doesn't it? Cool. So we've been working on the feature to do nice rolling Kubernetes updates for CF push, restage, restart if you select the rolling strategy. And I'll explain a bit how we got this to work. So we've just done a PR today, taking in the feedback we've got from Georgi and Danny's draft PR the other day. There was a bit of discussion about how to update Karifi when you've got an existing app. And that app shouldn't restart when you deploy Karifi, and it needs to go and sort of keep the same name and everything. There was a bit of complication there, but we got that all ironed out in the end. So here's K9s. These 3 pods here, the runtime pods of my app. So you've got three instances. So to jump straight in, if you do something like CF restart strategy rolling, you see that nicely taking down the stateful set pod number 2, and then 1, and then eventually 0. And let's see what's going on there as well. So if you look at the CF app, this is how we're controlling it now. So we've always had this annotation called apprev. That gets bumped every time the app goes from the start state into the stop state, or started into stopped. And previously, this was also used to compute the name of the app workload and the stateful set. So the app workload owns the stateful set. And when the change of the app workload, when the name of the app workload changes, the old one gets deleted, and that old one owns the stateful set. So the stateful set gets deleted, and then we end up creating a new stateful set on the new app workload. So that's how it was working. But now we don't want to do that every time we do a restart. If we do a full restart, that's what we want to happen, because sometimes the CF process controller can miss the stop state, which would be another reason for deleting the app workload. But yes, we want that name to stay stable unless we've done CF restart without the rolling. So we've introduced a new annotation called last stop apprev. And that we now use that for all the namings. And as a sort of migration, when this version of Karifi comes in, this will be set to be the same as apprev. So if I do a normal restart, well, let's do another rolling restart and see what happens. So that updates the app. It bumps the apprev, but this stays the same. So the result is, if we look at app workloads, we've just got the 1 and it's still old. It hasn't been recreated. And that's also associated with stateful set, which has been around for 5 hours as well. If I don't do strategy rolling, this just sets the app status to stop, then started again. So you can see that stateful set's just disappeared and come back with a new name. The app workload's only 9 seconds old as well. And if you look at the app, I think the last apprev was, I don't know, 13 or 14 or something. It's probably 14. So it's been bumped up to 15. But now you see the last stop apprev is also 15. So that's why the name of the app workload and the stateful set have changed. So the code has always been there to propagate this app rev into the stateful set. If you look at the stateful set definition, yeah, it's got an annotation there at the top level. Also inside the template, which is the pod definitions, you see it's that version's moved down there. So if you let things happen naturally and you change app rev, eventually the stateful set template app rev, version, whatever, gets bumped as well. And as soon as you do that, that's the effect of triggering a rolling update. So we're relying on that fact. That wasn't working until this PR because there was a match label in the stateful set pod selector which specified version. So that would say version 14, and when it changed to 15, it would be rejected because this is immutable, unfortunately. So we couldn't update stateful sets in the past. Now we can because we've removed version from the selector. What else? Yeah, so if you've got an existing app, that's going to have version in the selector. And so we're stuck. If somebody does a rolling restart or rolling push or something, it's going to fail. So nothing's going to work until you get a new stateful set created. So we're going to require that somebody does a CF restart or a CF push or whatever, CF restage, and that'll be sufficient to create a new stateful set with the right selector on it. And then we can do version updates. Yeah, so if I just do that strategy rolling thing again, you just have to guess what the CF app looks like now. So we should have app rev bumped from 15 to 16, but because we did a rolling thing, the last stop app rev should be 15. So there you go. Anything I missed, Giuseppe?
Yeah, it just that change we made to the match labels is a bit of a critical change, because basically it means that you can't just try to restart rolling restart. It's an app that you had running before this change came in, because that app will have a stateful set which uses the version in its label matcher, which means as soon as you try to restart with rolling, it's going to try to update that label, and labels that are part of a matcher are immutable. So the Kubernetes will reject that change, and it will leave your app in a bit of a state, because basically the number will have been bumped, which means the controller will constantly try to propagate it and always fail, because it will always get rejected until I guess it gives up at some point. But the clean way of doing it would be tell people to first do like a non-rolling restart on all the apps they already have running, and then all rolling restarts will work. It concerns me slightly, but maybe it's not that big of a deal if we don't have that many people around with running apps, if you see what I mean. We could point it out in the release notes, but like we couldn't find any. Unfortunately, I don't think there is a way to do this smoothly, because you have to in order to change that selector, you have to recreate the stateful set, right? So you have to do something that triggers this hard restart, which would be either a push or a CF restart without the rolling strategy, or maybe a restage. Yeah, anything that leads to the recreation of the stateful set works, because then the new stateful set doesn't have that label in the selector, and then you can update it and everything works fine. Of course, if someone has like a foundation with like 1 million apps, they would have to restart all of them. That would be kind of disruptive. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about this, but that would be the big issue here. Other than that, yeah, I think we found a relatively elegant way of supporting both things, and kind of works.
Stuff's going to fix itself, isn't it, as you go along, as people do CF push. it's there.
Yeah, I guess so. It's like you try a rolling deployment, it doesn't work, and it kind of sits there in this state of constant retrying. And then at some point you push again and it kind of fixes itself.
Can the error message returned by the failed rolling restart tell them that they need to do a regular restart to make this work?
I guess, do they even get an error message, or does the thing just sit there?
I mean, I'm assuming that it eventually times out. Or
I don't know,
it doesn't
because
even do anything because it doesn't actually restart the workload.
I don't remember. Karen, do you remember? I think we tried to do it, but I don't remember how it behaves.
We only tried it on the as a kubectl user. We didn't try it on the deployment. We should have a
We
look.
could try it now, maybe. The thing is, no, you can't, because you need to deploy an old Corifi. Like
Right.
you need to deploy the old version of the code, push some apps, and then deploy the new version and try. The thing is, in order to support these deployment commands, so anything that does the strategy equals rolling, you have to support these endpoints, these deployment endpoints, and the way and then the CLI uses these endpoints, right? And we've implemented the create and the get endpoints for deployments. And for get, we just look at the app and we say, okay, if the app is in a certain state, then the deployment is ongoing, is in progress. If the app is in another state, then the deployment is complete. I don't think we ever say the deployment has failed. So it might just hang. It could either, so there's two options basically, because there's two possible outputs from that endpoint. Either it just returns immediately as if the restart had happened, but it actually hasn't, or it just hangs there forever until, I guess, it times out.
Right.
I don't know. It depends on the state that the app assumes in this interim. But my guess is that it just returns because the app never gets actually restarted, which means the app's status conditions probably never change.
I think it'll appear as down because we'll bump the app rev on the app, and then
this will never affect the pod.
We'll be looking for the wrong version of the pod. The pod won't exist at that version. So it might appear down when we do the metrics bit.
Is there a way on the create and deployment endpoint to detect that your app workload is an older one that can't support it and just like fail early there, or is that messy?
Oh yeah, I mean you detect it by looking at that selector and seeing it's got version in it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could find a way, right, to say, like, to have something that is immediately evident on the app, maybe, I don't know. So that when you try on an app that is flagged as, old or whatever, like even if we have to add some code to the app reconciler to kind of mark old apps and then remove that mark when at the first restart or something, maybe that's not too bad. Because just telling people, you can now use strategy rolling, people will go and literally just mess up their apps.
Right.
That doesn't sound great.
Like it feels like it would be sufficient, just something in the API layer to block it. Like I think kubectl users, that's like very much more difficult to like coordinate your rolling deployment anyway.
Yeah, the kubectl flow is just bump the position and we'll roll for you.
Yeah, I wanted to show that. So here's an app. If you want to go and do a kubectl style thing, you just.
Or I guess, I mean, that's not difficult. It's just, it's like, I don't think it's discoverable. Like people aren't going to do that.
Yeah.
So like it feels like something lightweight in the create deployment handler that could just like detect and like error early would solve 99% of these.
Would that last app stop rev label be there by default, or does that get added the first time you try and do a push or a restart? Or
it'll get added by the reconciler when the new version of Corifi starts up.
Got it. Okay.
And we default it to app rev everywhere it's used, just in case we hit the empty string.
Okay, so that's not something that you could detect.
No.
So you would have to go into the API shim to, like, I mean, if from the API shim, you would have to go all the way to the app workload to.
It's pretty grim because you don't really know what that runner is. It could be anything.
That's
Right.
true.
You know, it needs
Yeah.
to be
I
either
think it might be
propagated
better
up
to, like-
or yeah.
I mean, I was thinking like in the controller, when you're reconciling the app workload, if you notice that it still has a selector on it, you could either fail in a meaningful way, or you could just delete the thing and re-reconcile, right? And force a hard restart, even though they asked for a rolling restart. The only
Yeah,
problem
maybe,
is that
'cause-
you're carrying code around for this sort of ephemeral.
Yeah, the tricky bit is I think part of the damage that gets done is because you've bumped the number, kind of assuming that the number bump will cause all these things that you want. And then you've bumped the number, and then downstream things have broken, but the number is bumped now, so logs are broken because you'll be looking for a different number, and a bunch of things are broken because you'll be looking for a different number.
I
So
kind of like
basically, we
that.
say,
Yeah, I kind of like that idea of just jumping in though and saying they wanted a restart. We're going to make it a medium restart and delete the
Yeah.
stateful set at that point.
if we can do that, yeah, I think it's fair, which I think is what the first implementation did. Like the first rolling deployment wasn't rolling, but it was still, sorry, the first rolling restart wasn't rolling. It was a regular restart, which would fix your thing for the future rolling restart. If we can achieve the same thing, then that's a lot better, because like, yeah, I guess you're not getting a rolling restart the first time around. Not great, but also not tragic. And then from that point onwards, the app is kind of self-heals.
Did it
Well,
ever do that
what we
originally?
have
I
now.
thought it just deleted all the app workloads and made new ones, like in the controller. Like it wasn't in response to any action.
That was my understanding, but yeah, I'm not super familiar with the implementation.
But anyways, yeah, I think what Julian said is fine. Like it's no different from like doing the harder restart for them is no different from then like saying, oh, you can't do this yet. You got to do your hard restart and then it will do it. But like the only thing I was concerned with was just like the original proposal, which was take down everything and restart everything. Like seemed very disruptive.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, we definitely need to like spend a second or two thinking about how we can do this, but it might be feasible.
Sounds good.
the only concern about doing a hard restart when the user wanted a rolling restart is the timing. Like if they're thinking, oh, I can do a rolling restart safely because there's not going to be any downtime, it ends up doing a hard restart and causing downtime. They may have chosen, if they'd gotten an error message, to say, oh, okay, I'll do that 12 hours from now.
Yeah, that's fair.
Fair enough.
No.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they're not trying this out for the first time in production.
Well, yes.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I feel like we can kind of rely on whoever is using this not being on anything like production,
I mean,
on production or super sensitive.
that's
But also,
true.
yeah.
But if they don't get an error message and they think it worked as intended, they may then go and do it in production.
Yeah.
Maybe a warning where it's like, oh, you know, something like all workloads need to be hard restarted the first time, proceeding with hard restart. And we do it anyway, but at least we tell them, I don't know, something like that.
But how
Yeah.
this is that brings us back to how do we detect that we have to display the warning?
I wonder if like this might not help us right now, but I wonder if there is value in like capturing like some version, like this app was pushed with some version of Karifi thing. Because I'm also just wondering how are people like we could tell them exactly what selectors and stuff to look for, but in general, how does someone know how old a workload is? Like what? So like it might be just like useful generally to track that on these things.
In Irini, we had like a full-fledged migration framework, which worked like in the spirit of, I think, the Rails one, where like it persisted, a version. It was not the Irini version. It was like the migration number, basically, or the timestamp or something on the objects, so that it will be able to say, oh, this object hasn't been migrated to the latest thing, so it will apply all migrations. Yeah, it was inspired by Rails, right? Where it would just run when you boot up the new Irini, this thing spins up, and maybe it's a bit too much. But at the time, it solved us a bunch of problems because we found ourselves in situations where like we just had to migrate a bunch of things up front. Or
Yeah,
was
it might be
convenient to do so.
useful eventually. Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that too. Like,
Sure.
but like I think it generally like this makes a lot of sense, that this PR and stuff, like it feels like we can build on it with some of these things. Like the worst case right now is you push with rolling, your app gets in a bad state, but you can do a CF restart to get it out of that state, right? Like I think it's not like a disastrous case, and it's not like breaking every app or anything. Like it feels like something we could, like, I don't know, like we could choose to like try to load all this onto this PR, but it also feels like the type of stuff we could add on like in subsequent ones.
This another thought, I don't know if this is a stupid thought or not, is so you've got this thing, you can't update it because you need to remove the selector, right? What you really want to do is just change some other field and not change the selector. What if you just left the selector as is? Is that gonna not select stuff?
Yeah,
Or-
it's fine on the stateful set to pod relationship, but you need that pod version to be set correctly for logs at the moment and things like that, and metrics.
Oh,
So if you then update the version in the template for the pod's going to get the new version, but then the selector's got the old version. So then the stateful set loses its pods and then creates some new ones for you. Yeah, it's a shame version was in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wait, well, yeah. I see. So basically we need the version to be updated because we use the version for logs, but we need to specifically not use it for the stateful set.
Which means creating a new stateful set.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because we want to be we want it to be updatable, because the whole point of this rolling deployment is you bump this annotation and then it kind of propagates, and that leads naturally, it leverages the stateful set behavior, which propagates updates in a rolling fashion. But like if you include it in the selector, it automatically makes that thing immutable. So the two things are just orthogonal. You can even you can either get one or the other.
I was just trying to think, like, how do we wriggle ourselves out of this temporary upgrade transition? And I was thinking, well, maybe we could just temporarily leave the version till the next time they do a hard restart or a push.
Yeah, that would be ideal, because it would be smooth.
But it doesn't.
And no one would notice, but I don't think it's possible.
If it breaks logs, then that's not better. Okay.
Yeah. And like even migrations won't help if the thing's immutable.
Right.
And it's the thing you're trying to keep up and running.
Right. Yeah, unless your migration would have to hard restart everything.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's immutable, so it needs to be a restart. So even a migration framework would have to restart everything.
Yeah. If the main thing we're concerned about is downtime on the restart, could you, when the app workload reconciler detects this, could it create the new stateful set and then delete the old one instead of the other way around, so that the new app comes up first and then there are just extra apps that
they have to have the same name though, so I think it's impossible to create the two at the same time.
Right, because the version is the same and so they have the same name. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're deep into solutioning here.
Yeah. No, that was really cool though.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'm confident that whatever you come up with will be awesome.
Do we have anything else on the agenda? We have a new validator library entry.
Yeah, just a question, because we were looking at the validation stuff because we had some refactorings in mind. But it looks like at the moment the most urgent change to the whole validation thing is the switch from the old library to the new one, right? So I feel like at the moment we probably only introduced the new library for manifests validations, and the old one is still there everywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But I was looking at the way it's done, right? It's still like, in terms of like how we use the library is not that different from the old one. Like the old one had annotations on the objects, like on the structs. The new one, we implement a validate method on each type that we want to validate.
Mm-hmm.
While I think at the beginning we had talked about having like these standalone validator objects instead. So my question is, given we're using them in very similar ways, does it still make sense to switch? Is it, I remember also the reason was error messages are a bit bad with the old library. So is that why we want the new one?
I think that was one of the main driving forces. Was
Right.
much better.
I feel it doesn't give us a better design per se, because you still have to, you're still not going to have like an injectable validation logic, if you see what I mean. Like every type will have the validation logic attached to itself.
Mm-hmm.
You can't easily swap it, but maybe that's fine. If what we get back is better error messages, because we did see that, yeah, the error messages seem to look a bit better. And the new library returns a slightly more structured error that can be deconstructed to build error messages the way we like. So that is the main reason. So maybe we should just proceed going struct by struct, strip off the old annotations from the old library and replace them with this validate method implementations for which validate the same things. And even before we do that, probably backfill tests if they're not there, so that you can verify that when you switch from one library to the other, you haven't dropped any validation, basically. Okay. Yeah, I had this suspicion. I remember talking a lot about error messages because the old error messages were just bad, and there wasn't much we could do to improve them. While the new ones can be kind of massaged a lot more. Okay, makes sense.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I think we can call it. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you all soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye.